Alright, so I wanted to run this dungeon idea past you. Um... It was kind of a challenge or just a, hey, can we build something like this from earlier? Where, how would you go about building a castle-style dungeon? Oh. It's Random Planes, Joe, with an S. Pieman is doing a res please with a Z. Male fairy cleric. Seems good. Oh, yeah, does someone want to go and save Paisy? Paisy is locked in the dungeon. So as I was plotting, I thought to myself, all right, how can we make a sketch out? Joe, if you want to save Paisy, roleplay through it. What would you do? If you go back up and you look for how you can try and find Paisy, how you can interact. Dorgrim. Actually, in thinking about it, could a variant human do that at level 1 if they take a feat? Is there a feat that could give you extra AC at level 1? What a combo. Wouldn't that be nice if you could party gnome? So, if you're designing a dungeon, and Ivalon may or may not have other opinions, and you out there may have other opinions as well, because I'm the big picture guy. I sit down and I like to sketch. I like just throwing down ideas. I suggest using ink pen and paper, and the reason for that is if you don't make a mistake. And I'm not saying that like, no, don't make a mistake, you have to be perfect. Draw and write what comes to mind. If you take away your ability to erase, that it helps put a creative light in front of you. It can help inspire you, or say, okay, no, this happened, but I can roll with it. How else can I build on this idea? It came to me, I wrote it down. It may sound dumb, or it may look awkward, but what can I do with it? So I love brainstorming with pen and paper and not pencil. Chemison, welcome, hello to you. It's good to see you back. Hashtag big picture. Yes. This is just should say Evelon or something right over here. Paisy says, I find mistakes make a world more natural and interesting. You can't read a lack of intention. And your players aren't going to know the difference, right? So the prompt was a dungeon that was based on a castle. Now, you can run a traditional castle, no problem. Walls and buildings and whatnot. And there's plenty of ways that you can go about that. I wanted to mix it up a little bit, though. And I even didn't want to give the standard, like, it's a haunted castle. I mean, we can make rumors that it is. But undead can be anywhere, right? Because undead are usually found where humans are. Or, I mean, humanoids. You get what I'm saying. So, how can we make a unique concept? Oh, let's look at aberrations, then. Aberrations are the result of human activity. sometimes lingering, or it could be very recent. And I wanted to put a castle, so I started by drawing a castle, right? Here's a wall, here's some buildings rising up out of it. And I said, let's put it on top of a peak, and we'll have a winding mountain path. Yeah, undead are so blasé. Oh my pantheon of gods, undead. That was so 2017. So now we have a twisting mountain path. We have a castle atop a peak. Put in some kind of a village, like a starting area. And I figure, hey, let's have a river actually coming, because a village is next to a water source. Well, why don't we have the river coming out of a cave at the base of the mountain? And I bet there's some way that we can connect the castle on high with the cave and the river coming out. All right, so what is the purpose? Discover the source of the aberrations washing out of the mountain. So we have aberrations, and they're kind of floating on the river, and they're upsetting the locals, because they're oozes, or I don't know, maybe some Nothics or some other things like that. The purpose of your dungeon should be clear to you as its creator. Summarize it in 1 or 2 sentences. Don't have it be a big, long, scrolling history. What is the point that you're working for at all steps of the dungeon? Discover the source of the aberrations washing out of the mountain. Aberrations washing out. I mean the mountain, but of course there's the castle and the mountain that are intrinsically a part of it. 1 sentence, and you work towards that goal every step of the way. Ivlon says, I feel like having the characters fighting through a castle is a very poor way of doing a castle. It'd be a lot more fun to have the characters try to guard the castle in a siege. Maybe like have them fight those aberrations from the castle to keep them from getting to the village. That could be the case, Ivlon. Hopefully you'll find my idea to be interesting enough. Like, here's a standard presentation, and then let's shift it a little bit. Now, something else to consider, as is said in one of the links down below on the channel. Here are 7 considerations to have in your dungeon as you're making one. Something to steal. Something to be killed. Something to kill you. Different paths. Someone to talk to. Something to experiment with. And something the players probably won't find at all. You can take this 7 and reduce it down to 5. To like sort of a 5-room dungeon. Dorgrim, was that you or was that Bubonic? Or it might have been a couple of you put out the concept also. Not just the 7 things to have in your dungeon, but how to run a 5-room dungeon. This is going to go a little bit more than 5 rooms. But I did want to bring this list up. Can we somehow work these elements into the dungeon that we're creating? Paisley is saying, hear me out. This is a nonsense idea. A Yggdrasil-like tree has grown inside this mountain castle. Anything you expect to find in there has been altered by an excess of life energy, with the final goal being destroying whatever seed is causing this before it spreads. This allows changing paths from roots, etc. Space to modify enemies. You know what? We might be able to work with that. Pie Man asks for a res, please, and comes back as a male goblin sorcerer. Dorgrim, yeah, it might have been the 5-room scenario. That might have been you who did that. Fluffy Sheep at Paisy, nothing wrong with that. It's pretty similar to the Angry DM's Mega Dungeon. So in the concept of this dungeon that I'm presenting here, we have the village of Bixley is in a pinch. Aberrations are attacking. Rumors say it's because of the abandoned castle above. Right? So the aberrations seem to be coming up out of the river, or at least this is the direction of the castle, the aberrations are coming into town from the direction of the castle. So they may be simple villagers, but they've put 2 and 2 together and hopefully have reached 4 or possibly 5 if we're using new math. So the initial part of this dungeon isn't really a classic dungeon. It would be speak with the locals, hear the rumors, do a little bit of shopping, and prepare yourself for what could possibly lie ahead. One second here. There we go. All right. Now, this is a good way as a DM to plant the seeds of rumors. If you want to try and dangle the possibility of undead, right? You can psych up your players, because your players are going to be expecting a castle full of ghosts and undead and other things. You can also if you don't want to go undead, you can say that a bandit gang has taken up hold a while ago in the castle, but they haven't been heard from since. No, I mean, not that the villagers would want to, host them or buy or sell or trade with them, but it's been rumored. But the bandit gang hasn't been seen in some time. So you can use this as a way to, for sure, you've presented that there are aberrations. In fact, you can even have your party fight an aberration that comes up out of the village, or out of the river to the village. Though here's your opportunity to, here's a truth and here's a lie, or at least a half-truth. GM Vault says, plants put a Golthias tree in the castle. Or a vampire tree. If you want to stick to that. So we've set up the party. It shouldn't take too long. It may not be the... Oh, a Golthias tree is a vampire tree. Gotcha. Now we're going to have a lead up. Quite literally a lead up to the dungeon. They follow the winding path up. It's a great opportunity to play some atmospheric music. And you can plant a couple clues along the way. Party Gnome, or one of my newly drawn demons. I'm quite proud of how the Butcher Demon turned out. Oh, did you share something on the Discord, Party Gnome? Was the boss monster in the very first 3rd edition dungeon. Yeah, Fluffy, I want to drink your sap. GM Vault says a vampire was staked with a green still live stake and it grew into a tree. Interesting. Along the way, indicate that there's evidence of traffic going up the hill, right? Footprints, maybe, that are facing going up. Always ascending, never descending. No one's come back down who's gone up there. Create a little suspension. Create some mood and some atmosphere with this dungeon. You know, you could talk about the cold mountain winds or something along those lines. You think you hear things, but it just turns out to be a couple pebbles here and there that are falling. Whoa, Golden! Thank you very much for that. Well, any creative input, for lurking, for being a part of the community. Cheers with a big picture to you. Thank you very much for the resubscription. Golden says. Okay, party. If you ever have questions too, you can send them to me, and then I can take a look at them on the side and let you know one way or the other. All right, so they're following the path up. There's evidence that traffic has gone up the mountain path, but not back down. And there is a trap or a hazard to increase the danger. In this case, it could be you could have a rock slide. You could have maybe some footing becomes unstable, and someone might be in danger of going over the side. Joe says, I'm the weirdo that would check the cave river. And you may very well do that, Joe. In concept, the water would be coming out at a rate that would prevent... like, you could get up to it. You could probably climb up and investigate the actual, like, source that the river is coming out of. But the rate of the water would be too great to go up and explore inside the cave. Though that is something that that's important if you're designing a dungeon, to consider your players will go and do things like that. They'll go and explore the mouth of the river and not take the obvious path. Pieman, oh, you defeated a centaur? Okay. Oh, is Darkwolf? Darkwolf is not here. Ivalon, are you on EXP duty? Okay, thank you. I thought Darkwolf was still around, but I don't know. She might have fallen asleep or something. But yeah, thank you for taking care of Pieman, Ivalon. So yes, as Joe said, he is a player who would want to go and check out the river, and that's completely logical. In fact, maybe that even can have its own, fight off to the side. As a DM, if you want to guide, give sort of natural indicators of where to go or not to go. In this case, the water coming out is going to be too quick to be able to, move upstream and be able to explore. Fluffy Sheep says, you can use features like that to challenge your players appropriately to their level. Low-level characters will be stopped. Mid-level ones can probably breathe water, will be most at disadvantage fighting. And high-level characters will be fine or just block and drain the river. Yes, if you want to scale it. Now, I should say in context here, I had a low-level... This is a low-level dungeon in mind. But Fluffy Sheep, you are correct. So we have them climbing the path, and to create that moment of tension, right? You're building and building, you have the villager rumors and so forth, and now someone slips and, grab my hand, do it now, I'll save you. You have that moment. You get up, there's a mystery, footprints going up, none are coming down. And now you need to get inside of the castle. You've made it to the top. It's not especially hard. Yeah, get to the castle! And remember, keep these 7 points in mind when designing a dungeon. Here's our winding path. And the winding path comes up. Actually, I wonder, I think I can draw here. Okay. There is a mesa at the top of the mountain. The castle is rising out from the middle. All in here. Whoops. Whatever, this works. This might have been a moat, or if nothing else, it's actually a pit that has it has like a bunch of stakes and sharp rocks, and it's very nasty. And it seems like there's an obvious way in. There's a drawbridge. However, the drawbridge is raised, right? It's flush against the wall. As the PCs make their way up, this is going to be the first thing that they see. All right. The castle is in the middle of a big spiked pit. There's a drawbridge over here. But how do we get the drawbridge down? It could have a guard, bubonic one. But to tell a tale a little bit, this is going to be effectively abandoned. And they see that on the spikes, like down in the pit, there's some bodies, and they almost seem to be lined up. Not exactly, so there's some natural like wibble wobble here. But what has caused bodies to line up in a row in this spiked pit? Well, you know what, GM Vault, that's a lot tamer than setting a bag of dog poo on fire and running away. And so you might have a very astute adventurer say, wait a minute, the width of the bodies appears to be the width of the drawbridge. Something might happen. This could be a trap. It probably is a trap. So then they look around, and they see, okay, I don't know, let's go this way. More spikes, more spikes. Oh, wait a minute. There's some more bodies over here. But all of the bodies are against the wall, and all of the bodies are, they're down in the pit against the wall. And none of the bodies look especially armored. They're wearing various tunics, robes, things like that. Thank you, Party Gnome. I'll take a look at it. So what could it be happening over here that there's a bunch of people at the base of the wall in a spiked pit? None of them are heavily armored. Well, Joe, if you toss a rock, it's just going to clatter among all the spikes down here. But how could you have just like a group of lightly armored people against the base of the wall, but they're still impaled on spikes? But that's fine. We'll consider. Hey, Mike the Canadian, good to see you. Let's continue around the dungeon. Spikes. Oh, this is morbid. As the DM, continue to build. You're telling a story. Make some, woo, whipping winds and howls and such. Adventure Trebuchet, says GM Vault. We're in part 2, Mike, and we are making a dungeon. So they come around, and sure enough, they see here that actually there was like a landslide or, you know, some rubble. The cliff, right? Because this is its own little cliff edge that goes down, I don't know, like 20, 30 feet into a pit below. It is a dungeon-themed, or I'm sorry, a castle-themed dungeon, Mike. Now, there's at least one figure, maybe two, who appear to be buried in the rubble. Well, this is making a bit of... It is making a bit of a staircase down. Will your players... I don't know. Will your players continue to circle and say, well, let's surround the castle first? Maybe. So they might just come around here, do. And if they're especially observant, they might actually get a clue. You could put one over here, or you could put it elsewhere. But if you notice, right here... the denizens are presumably some kind of aberration? Question mark? There also may have been like a bandit gang that lived in this castle, but no one's seen or heard from them in quite a while. There could always be undead. They notice, and perhaps if you want to highlight it a little bit, if you're making this a dry pit, you can say, well, there's some water in the corner, and it looks like there's some kind of a grate going into the foundation of the castle. So at this point, your players say, okay, here's the front door. There's bodies on either side of what looks to be the width of a drawbridge. This could be a trap, and it probably is a trap. They circle around. Wait a minute, what's this mystery? Why are there a bunch of people wearing like robes and tunics and cloth stuff that are just sort of like piled at the base of the wall at the bottom of the spike pit? Oh well, they come around and it looks like this cliff edge here has collapsed, causing a very rough and tumble, but almost like a staircase down into the pit. Well, here, hopefully, if your players haven't impaled themselves on the spikes... Fluffy Sheep says, I think there are more castles with undead in them than castles with nobility. Unless they're undead nobility. GM Vault says, it's really just a Wilderness Girls cookie factory. Nothing to worry about. So, at this point, your players have either put two and two together and said, wait, we can, there's some kind of an egress or ingress into the castle here, but how do we get down without falling and impaling ourselves like everyone else has? Aha! We can take this this very awkward, maybe you want it to be a climbing skill challenge or something. They can get down safely here because the spikes have been tumbled and torn underneath the rocks. Now, if your players didn't notice the grate, they can still descend down, and now it's a lot less scary when you can just walk in between the spikes without having to worry about impaling yourself atop them. So, by observation or just by stumbling through this, all the spikes in the pit, they'll eventually, hopefully, they'll eventually see that there's another entrance to the castle. Well, Mike, how the castle is designed here? So it is atop a mountain. It is atop a mountain here, but there's it. Here, let me go over here. Draw. And then we would have some kind of a ramp going down here. So the castle still rises up at the top of the mountain, and then you have the nice winding mountain path that leads up. But this is some kind of a moat. Or it could look, or you could even have a wall if you'd like. Spikes in a drain moat, yep. It's something along those lines. And you've made a very obvious front door. But there's danger. Well, now it seems like they're going to have to get in through a back door. And you've provided multiple ways. Now, Fluffy Sheep, to get to... I believe it was you that that brought it up. If you're scaling... Yeah, if you're scaling and that you have higher level adventurers... Ah, that's a very good question, Fluffy. That's a very good question. If we have mid to higher level adventures, what is going on? Like, you could probably just get over that, right? If this is a wall, here's a wall around the castle grounds. Well, if you're a mid-level adventurer and you're a magic user, what would be something that you would do to overcome this situation? Aha. Mike the Canadian says fly. And that's an excellent idea, right? As the party comes around and says, nuts to this. And they say, you know what we're going to do? We're going to cast the fly spell. Right? And so you have a person, usually wizards wear cloth or tunics or things along those lines. So you have people who are dressed in cloth that are casting fly spells. And you say, we're just going to fly over the castle wall. And so you go doot, 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 doot. And it's about at this time that you remember there's a whole pile of cloth-wearing corpses impaled on spikes at the bottom of this dry moat. And so hopefully, because look, as the DM, you provided the clue. You've already provided the, you've said, look, if you're doing this on your own. And there could very well be something about the walls that make it so suddenly, as you're flying, you're not flying anymore. And instead, you hit the wall, or even as you're trying to fly above the wall, something happens, and you fall down, and you're impaled upon a spike. Well, I don't know if there's exactly catapults to spare to get people over the walls, Bubonic. Party gnome may try and climb. It could be an option. There's not a clue about climbers, necessarily. Because as a DM, you're going to want them to get an idea and go in the back door of the castle here. However, you should be prepared that, Party Gnome might have an idea, or they might think of something else. And if that's the case, roll with it. Or that too, Bubonic One. Now what you've done is you've taken the classic trope of approaching a castle. And you know what? A lot of you had good ideas. You're like, oh, there's guards at the castle, or, you know, there's people in a castle, and it's just sort of a weird form of running a dungeon. Technotron, hello, good friend. We are going over an example of making a dungeon in a castle. That is not exactly the norm. So they've come around, right? Hopefully they've explored here. Maybe they've gone this way, or they'll come around this way, and they'll eventually find this other way in. After navigating... Rycon, hello! After navigating the spikes, or the corpses, or the, you know, puddles, and whatever. And you can drop clues in as a DM here. And what you've done is, unless Party Gnome or someone else has, you know, overcome your cleverness here... Because if they're so insistent that they want to go in through these traditional means, and they're willing to risk or sacrifice, hey, do that. Instead, you've given them this other option in order to get in easier. And now we'll go over to paint. Form a bridge with shape water and walk there on ice. Possible. Might require a skill challenge or something along those lines. Mike, that's a possibility, but you want to leave it a mystery. Unless your players really want to test it out. And in which case, you've set the precedent that they may very well find themselves having fallen a great distance and are not only taking falling damage, but also being impaled on spikes. For a low-level party, that's a very big risk. Well, you don't want to telegraph it too much. Look, you've already put a bunch of wizards at the bottom of the pit impaled on spikes. If they really want to go that route without fully exploring, Fluffy Sheep, you know, what's the context? Do you want to run a challenging dungeon, an easy dungeon? You, as the DM, can control that. In this case, if the players just want to rush up and cast spells and get over the wall magically without exploring, they'll succeed or die trying. Because you were lacking battlefield awareness. You were lacking investigation. You were lacking patience. Buffy, there is not lava on this map. But you probably saw I did put lava on the Underdark map that we made the other day. Well, Paisy, if that was the case, if you start flying and suddenly you're falling, what kind of an explanation would you be seeking? Imagination, hello to you. Technotron, I just did something about having a different Wizard Tower store. I made it a puzzle to get in, and when they unlocked it, the tower turned into a mimic. They're now waiting to do some shopping in the belly of the beast. Very quite literally, huh? So, Paisy, if you just flew, if you flew in without investigating, and you died, even if there's evidence of some kind, you know, if you didn't go through an investigation procedure, what can I, as the DM, offer you in explanation for what just happened? So now what you've done as a DM is you've offered the obvious lure. You have a very obvious entrance with a somewhat obvious trap, a physical trap, right? If there's bodies lined up on both sides with the width apart equal to the drawbridge, something's going on. And this should be the first thing that you see. Let alone anything about magic or flying or whatever. But then you see that there's the pile of the casters. And then you come over here, and there's some people who are buried in some kind of a rock slide that lead down. And we're actually going to begin this dungeon in the dungeon of a castle, right? You're going through a sewer grate. You're going to wind out at the bottom. You know, usually you enter a place and you go further down. So if you put the little puddle or an indicator like, hey, look over here, and they take you up on it, you can have a little bit of a swimming challenge or something along those lines. It doesn't have to be too difficult. But your party can then come up in some kind of a pool over here. Now from here, populate your dungeon. What's going on? What's happening? Do you want a bunch of little torture devices? You know, do you want a wheel? Here, we'll have it be like a hamster wheel. Except probably the one that breaks you. Even something small like hitting a bubble that could be anti-magic shell. It's about the hints in advance, but I and my players need that in universe reason rather than it's just a trap and it happened. Well, so hints have already been provided, Paisy. You had the hint of the drawbridge and the people. You had the hint of the dead, presumably magic users against the wall, and they're impaled on the spikes directly at the base of the wall. And you have hints that you may have gotten that this is an abandoned castle for a reason from the village down below. So you got to ask yourself, Paisy, how many more hints do you need that weird things are happening if these villagers don't go near the castle? If they don't, like, they care about what's coming out of it, they just, no one's gone to explore it for various reasons. And again, here's the other hint, Paisy. Footprints have only been seen going up, never coming back down. And presumably, magic might be at work if we're dealing with aberrations. Right? Because that's the theme of the dungeon. Aberrations are coming out of an underwater river that of a mountain that the castle sits atop. So as you hopefully you can see what I'm getting at, Paisy. You've had a lot of hints and opportunities to explore and investigate and put things together. So at this point, it's a meta conversation between you and the rest of the party and your DM to realize how difficult of a campaign do you want to run, or a dungeon, or are you running hard mode or easy mode or something along those lines. At last, the store, yeah, look, all the footprints go up. It must be an awesome place because everyone goes up and no one comes back down. It's the place to be. Well, the potential of an explanation can be there. It's just something that you would have to be patient and put together. And you know what? If everyone dies, then the DM, I would presume, would say, well, so this happened, and this is what might have been missed. Now piece it together, and what do you have? So you come in and you set the scene, and in here, at this point in time, anything's on the table. You can draw out your dungeon however you want. Bear in mind the level of the players that are coming into this dungeon. If you're gonna make traps, and they're only level 3, dealing a D6 of damage, let alone 2D6 or 3D6, that's a lot of damage. And I'm not saying you can't do that. But if if you want them to explore, you got to make it a slow burn. Anything you populate here in the dungeon, in the lowest level of the castle, make sure there's a reason for it. Why does it exist? Why is this here? Is it a torture device of some kind? In fact, you might even want to, maybe an illusion of someone. Every now and again, they think they see someone being pulled on the rack, or they think they hear someone being branded with a hot iron, or they're having thumb screws applied to them. Party Gnome says, I have an optional boss in my campaign which is trapped in a dead magic zone, which is more or less a hollow sphere of dead magic. Just 1 kilometer radius, outer sphere, and 500 meters inner sphere. This hollow sphere is the boss's trap zone. So if they wander into it, and like, do they engage it if they release it because the anti-magic or the dead magic was keeping it trapped or contained? Party Gnome? So in this first floor, I don't know, maybe you want to put in a... you want to put in a trap. You could even put in a little monster right here, right? We'll make it have a frowny face because therefore it's obviously evil if it's frowny. What would you put in this? Right? I'm proposing an idea to you here. And this is ultimately going to go somewhere. I have a beginning and I have an end. And I want you to help bridge the middle. Okay? We have the ascent. We have the village. Village. Possible side exploration, but you go up the path. You get to the castle. You find that the castle, something weird is going on. Well, obviously, if it's throwing out aberrations, well, presumably, there's not exactly a ready source of water up here. They enter, and you don't enter through the front door or the side door. You enter through like a sewer grate. You don't start at the top, you start at the bottom, and you're going to be working your way up. Fluffy Sheep says, I like anti-magic fields that also unlock the monsters. Like, suppose there's a dead lich trapped in an anti-magic field. The players find a way to turn it off, celebrate for a moment, but then the lich wakes up. I do that sort of thing a lot. Opening up a new section of the dungeon also opens it for the next stage of monsters. It allows you to have a variety of, I presume, monsters instead of minstrels, without having to explain or gloss over why the orcs are working with the undead for some reason. And something similar is going to be happening here, Fluffy Sheep. Over the course of the dungeon, something's gone wrong. Some kind of magic, some kind of curse, divine, arcane, natural, like, primal, like druids and stuff. Something's happened up here. And what this springboard, and now you're free. Imagine this dungeon, participate in a conversation, throw out ideas. Something has happened to the bandits that are up here. They might even be the ones who are being turned into aberrations and are getting washed out somewhere else to flow down the river to the village. Include what you want. These are random buildings. I didn't look at structures at castles and all this. I made a shape and I filled it in. Because the details in this brainstorm aren't as important as the concept to be presented. To think a little differently. How to plant clues. How to lead up to something. We come back here. Make sure that things are relevant. And then when they go through the door to the next section... this could be someone who, it could even just be another corpse. It could be an impaled corpse. Meaning that someone, remember, so this is a clue, someone has gone out, fetched a corpse off a spike, and brought it in here. And may or may not have used the same route that you did, which could cause concern. Otherwise, if they didn't, that means that there's an alternate route some way, somehow. Maybe someone can actually operate that front gate. and has harvested corpses that way. And for what purpose? Party says the boss is trapped in there as it is. The boss has no plot hook or something, just lore-based. An old entity that has been trapped by heroes of the past. I'd say there's nothing that could free the entity besides another aeon or two of its influence, stretching the inner sphere always further and slowly threatening to breach the dead magic sphere. GM Vault, time for bed, 11-hour shift tomorrow. All right. Hey, thank you for the humor and the fun and for being a part of the conversation, GM Vault. And I look forward to your next video. So now the interior, this is up to you. Right? This is already a mystery. What's going on? Things are happening. Do you want to take the approach that Fluffy said and have one room lead inexplicably to the next? Has the castle been fragmented in time or space? Has something broken atop this castle? And the players are going through disjointed areas. In fact, if you want to try something fun and it doesn't even need undead, they go through this room and then they find themselves back in the same room. Except this room, instead of having the frowny monster or the impaled corpse, or let's say it's a frowny monster, now it's an impaled corpse. And they go through the door again. Bada boom, same thing. Instead of an impaled corpse, it's something else. And other details around the room have subtly changed. And now it suddenly turns into a rotoscope as they're going through the room and they're seeing step by step something mysterious, something weird has happened in this room. And until they can figure out that, you know, there's something, I don't know, there's an X over here that needs to be put into an X-shaped receptacle over here that may not have been obvious in room 1. It may not be obvious in room 2. As you're presenting the dungeon, it becomes obvious in room 3. Room 3, it gets the receptacle, they go through the door, and suddenly they come back out. And there's people. Is it the bandits? Is it the old nobility that used to live there? Did they travel in time? Are these ghosts? Are these two aberrations or illusions? You're creating doubt. You're creating some stress. What is going on? Your PCs then may interact or even not interact, right? Maybe they're just walking through and finding out what's going on. There's more clues to this place. What about the drawbridge? What about the walls? Here they are if they've kind of gone back or they're displaced in some way. And they can find out more about the dungeon. They can follow people and find out where items are kept. A storeroom, an armory, and perhaps there is even a court wizard that has a tower somewhere on this complex. And perhaps, after going through this dungeon of sorts, they can find a big clue as to what happened. They can then see the moment that things had fractured, that things went wrong. And at that point, how do they get back with this knowledge? How do they get back to fix the cracked orb in the wizard's tower? That, and by the way, as I said, if you're open-minded as a GM, or as a DM GM, as Party Gnome said, she might have rigged up something that overcame this anti-flying defense. And she maybe just tried to scale the wall. She got lucky with some 20s on athletics. Well, that's fine, because she's exploring the state of the tower as it is now. And she wouldn't have these clues. Because even if Party Gnome went up to the court wizard's tower and found the broken sphere or whatever you want to use, that doesn't mean anything to her as a player. She still has to go through the filter of what happened, what's going on, she has to trigger this sequence of events. Just because she's looking at things now doesn't mean that she's even spoiled anything for herself. Because for those who are going into it blind, you know, you're coming up through the sewers into the dungeon itself, and you're now getting a feeling something isn't right here. Well, you're going to have to explore the decrepit castle yourself. In her case, she's going to actually have to kind of go out of her way and then filter back up. It's kind of approaching the same problem from two different ends. Party Gnome, more fodder for another story. Yep, sometimes just having those loose ends out there, Party Gnome, if your characters are interested in it, they'll tug at that loose end and they'll reveal more story. Otherwise, they'll say, ooh, we don't want to touch that. That's big, bad, evil guy, and they'll leave it alone, and you're like, okay, that's fine. Anyway, GM Vault, take care. Fluffy Sheep, an old school non-Euclidean maze. And Party Gnome says, Fluffy Sheep, I love you for that comment. So yes, you're telling a tale with this dungeon. This is not a classic dungeon crawl. This isn't, this isn't a maze where someone can take a piece of chalk and always mark the right direction. This isn't a way that you can just meld through stone. Because for all you know, you're not even in the same place. Something is broken here. Something needs to be fixed. And now that you're here, you know, once you go through this door, guess what? This puddle is probably not here anymore. The trap door has closed behind the party. They have to solve the problem of what's going on, because exiting out the way they came isn't an option. Hola, Spicy Larry. Big pitcher of water to celebrate the spiciness. You're just stopping by. Hope you're feeling good, feeling fine. It's a wonderful Friday. We're getting a weekend. The weekend is begun. And Party Gnome quickly falls on her sword. Oh, Party Gnome. So think about this. Come up with your story. Use random elements. In fact, if you want random elements, Ivalon will probably pat me on the head for this. There's a whole book of random elements that you can use to link together. I'm giving you the lead-in, and I'm giving you the way out. But I want you to critically think about this. If I just present you, right? You are my players here for a second. I presented you with a scenario that might have been baffling. Why can't we fly? Who are the bodies in the pit? What's going on? Well, you don't know what's to come. So as a DM, by the way, take that attitude. Your players don't know. You may not even not know if you're just kind of making this up on the fly. I mean, keep the math appropriate for the level, but if you're making up content, if you're generating it ahead. But use the dungeon to tell your tale. Something happened up here. Something big. In fact, if we go back here, does this concept meet? Was there something to steal? I'll say so. Something to be killed? Oh yeah. There's going to be at least aberrations, if not some kind of a boss. Whether it's a monster or a thinking creature. Something to kill you all day, every day in here. Different paths? Yes, indeed. Different paths in, different paths up, different paths through. Someone to talk to? You had the villagers that started the adventure. And now, if you get displaced inside this castle, there might be others. Whether they're surviving bandits who can give clues as to what happened. Maybe they found the wizard's tower and a Butterfingers, like a very clumsy thief, took this orb and dropped it. And when he did, boom, reality shattered on the castle grounds. Whoopsies. That's still someone to talk to. Something to experiment with? Well, the walls and the finding a way in is an experiment. On the inside, as you're seeing, as you're almost playing, the idea before. I don't know if you've played PT, which was that teaser trailer for the Silent Hills game that wasn't going to be made because reasons. How you'd go through the same house over and over again, but something would change slightly every time. Plenty in here to experiment with. Something the players probably won't find. Oh, you bet. You can put all kinds of nooks and crannies in here. Ivlon, you're heading to bed. All right. Cheers, Ivlon. Thank you very much. Mike asks, what book is that? It is the DMG. This is just the straight up Dungeon Master's Guide right here. If you want to create a dungeon, you can do so through charts. You can do so, if you don't want to create it off of a chart, you can get roleplay inspiration through various roles, just like we make a random character and we connect the dots. All right, Evelyn, thank you. So, all of this has to lead somewhere. You're creative out there. You fill in the juicy middle. I've provided a huge prompt for you. What would you do in this situation? How would you explain the walls? How would you explain the footprints leading up and none coming back? Well, presumably things are fixed and you can go back to the world. Well, the world is okay, but the world still has aberrations coming out of it. And that's the point then where we have... Well, that's probably not the right... here we go. And here we have whether a chase sequence or it's kind of like the end of Goonies when they're all going through the water slides at the end of the pirate's puzzle. Here you have maybe the one responsible. It could even be that Butterfinger's thief who didn't learn a lesson. Maybe after going through and restoring this gem, this shattered gem that the party worked so hard for, this clumsy thief steals it and runs off. He runs back through and into another building of the castle, because there's several. There should be several buildings in a castle. Oops, he slips and falls. And the orb shatters again. Now at this point, if the castle's been freed from its curse, you could presumably use the drawbridge, fly over the walls if you have spells left, or things along those lines. You could make a normal exit. Or if you're chasing the thief back down, he slips, and the orb shatters, and both he and the orb... In fact, what if the orb itself even falls on him and shatters on him? And so instead of just leaking reality-breaking magic, or anti-magic, or something, displacement into the world, it leaks into him. And now you have this thief, this bandit, who is having some karmic punishment for his crime and for his clumsiness. He falls into the water. And you know that this person who maybe you saw rapidly changing in front of you is now washing down this underground river from the base of the castle and is going to emerge in the middle of the village somewhere and wreak havoc. What do? Alternate paths, right? Do you want to race down the mountain path and have gravity work for you that way? Maybe you have a chase sequence or you get inside a wagon and you just sort of ride the brakes as you go down hairpin turns. Do you want to jump in the water and go on a water slide, trying to chase down this rapidly mutating Eldritch abomination before it can reach the starting village and do whatever it's going to do? And there's your boss fight. There's the resolution. And not only have you told a story, you've also made a moral point too. You can use it as an Aesop's fable. You can use it as a bit of a fairy tale. Just one that will leave a couple bruises on your PCs when they're done. Mike says, okay, I have my own DMG. Gonna have to give a good read through the dungeon building. Mike says, so wait, aberrations are leaving, but there's no footprints. Either a river or just tunnels running deep. So what this is going to indicate at the end, Mike, people have gone up. Adventurers, villagers, bandits, and they've entered the castle, or they've just died trying, right? You know, you're not going to shamble back down if you're dead, not undead. But that means that the occupants inside have been slowly degenerating into aberrations. And as they wander around, they find themselves swept into this river. And so every once in a while, they'll just sort of like bloop, plop out. And the villagers have to beat back a couple oozes or something that are growing. Or the aberrations, like a couple people changed, and the aberrations themselves in that form have been able to multiply. And so that's explaining why there's tracks going up but no tracks coming down. When you go up to this point, everyone has died or everyone has turned. Or if people have lived, they've taken the water route and not gone back down the mountain trail. Mike says, plus, hey, who knows? Maybe the tunnels run deep, far deeper than expected from the Underdark hook. Works if you want to use some Underdark aberrations. Yes, I did want to make sure that we could drop this into the map as necessary as well. So for all of you out there, I know this isn't like a complete module dungeon. You know, I don't even have any hard numbers for you here, other than to remind you to keep it appropriate if you're going to use a hazard, a trap, or a fight for the level at which you're planning the adventures to go into and through this dungeon. But use your imagination. Start with a piece of paper and a little drawing. Make a one-sentence explanation. Discover the source of the aberrations washing out of the mountain. From this sketch, from this one-sentence goal, we have now created some sort of disjointed, fun, magical, dangerous, monster puzzle dungeon that exists in the world. You have a boss monster, you've had a chase, you've had traps and hazards and other monsters. You've solved mysteries and puzzles, all contained in this disjointed, weird, oopsie-daisy moment that you mostly filled in. Because again, this was off of a sketch and a list of considerations. Mike says, I can already see some Soar of Alhoun secluding themselves away for their studies into the arcane. I'm not sure I follow, Mike. Was that a mistype of something? So, for those of you out there, like, was this inspirational to you? Like, even if you're lurking and you just say, like, Y or N, or you kind of do a circle slash or whatever, for all of you, was this inspirational? Was this helping you to conceptualize a dungeon experience? To not just have it be like, yes, you have an expectation. Gotcha. Castle on a cliff. I'm an adventurer. I can get this done. And suddenly, whoa. Party gnome, you liked it? Fluffy? Imagination? All right. You lurk here. Thank you for lurking, imagination. Right? You've taken the obvious and you shifted it to the side. It's fine if you don't, imagination. You're always welcome to do so and to play the chat games. Technotron, it's always helps seeing what other DMs do. You know, it's like... Think of it this way. In fact, this might be a very good room for this kind of a dungeon. We'll do a little bit of roleplay. You're my players. You're going through this dungeon. You walk into a circular room. You look around and around. And it seems blank, right? It's almost like it has smooth walls. It's a circle. But something's not right about it. And so you investigate. And, you know, you look, you touch, and when it comes down to it, based off your dice roll, the clues, anything that you're doing in and out of character, I tell you that you have just walked into a room, to a circular room that is 363 degrees around. What does that do? If I just described a room to you that's 363 degrees round, what does that mean to you? How do you conceptualize a circle that is 363 degrees? Yes, Mike. Dorgrim's thinking spiral. Party Gnome is saying it's rounder than a circle. Mike is going with the illusion route. Technotron says overlap into the fourth dimension. You see how this one weird prompt has solicited several different replies? As a DM, sometimes just drop a detail and let your players talk it out. Sometimes things also just don't have to make sense. As was kind of the tease with, why can't people get over the wall by fly? You know, as you know, as was I would like an explanation for this, please. And sometimes the explanation is, it doesn't have to make sense. Now, in a meta conversation, be fair to your PCs as a DM. Please be fair, provide clues or something along those lines. Technotron is demoted for the fourth time. You know, what if I describe this room to you and I said in the periphery, in your peripheral vision, right out here, the room, like everywhere in front of you is round and you can keep turning in circles. But in your peripheral vision at all times, it's almost like there's a ripple that follows you maddeningly, always just on the cusp of your vision. That's where you're getting your extra 3 degrees. Yet everywhere you face is smooth and a normal circle. Which, by the way, it's always fun to determine how far your peripheral vision goes, right? You start in the middle, and then you keep looking forward, and you see when your fingers disappear. And you can also try testing color that way. So if you take something red. Oh, hey. I was at Taco Bell a little while ago. So you take something red, and you move it off to the side. When do you stop seeing the object, and or when do you stop seeing the color of the object while still staring straight ahead? Party Gnome, the room is just normal. The space towards the center is actually compressed. The circle has more space, has more room than it should, since having its containing compressed space. And so you can rationalize that, Party Gnome. Look, you're a smart girl. Now, you've proven that here time and again. How do you take that concept and put it through the eyes of a barbarian? How do you take that concept and even put it through the eyes of a wizard? if you're playing a halfling rogue and you're used to trusting your eyes and your senses, right? Because you're the scout or the lockpick or whatever. How does that make you feel as a character if I just described a room to you to a character that thinks and acts the way that he or she does? That suddenly this circle is more than a circle. Well, Mike, if you're having a hard time wrapping your head around that, that means we're actually doing a good job. Dorgrim says, most of the time my puzzles don't have a solution that I've decided upon. I let the players come up with it and work their ideas into the narrative. Yep, and that's something else that you can do in this style of thinking or planning a dungeon. The expectations of your players will themselves be fuel for your generator, your content generator as a DM. Fluffy says, I always try to come up with at least one. That way I don't accidentally make it impossible. Yep, I understand, the multiple paths and such, Fluffy. I agree with that. Party says, as you watch Siegfried walk towards the center of the room, he seems to become smaller. Not like just walking away from you, as you see Rin is actually taller than him despite standing in the opposite room. And normally she's smaller than Siegfried. So Mike, can you, does that help? Or think of this way. If someone is walking towards you, they get bigger, right? In your perspective. Someone's walking towards you and is actually getting smaller. If only slightly, right? If only by a little bit. Just enough to let you know that something's wrong. Something's not right. Technotron, I always give my puzzle a HP, so when it comes to that point, they can always hit it with a hammer. Oh, gotcha. That happened. So that happened to me recently, Technotron. And in fact, I'll see if any of you out here can get this puzzle. No. I'll trust you. No Google foo. You gotta promise to do this on your own. Okay. So the context was the party. The party was going through a tunnel filled with water, and because they're on their way to talk to a major fire elemental and a major water elemental, and they are at the headwaters of this underground river, which is actually warm, and it's in a sense it's carbonated. Actually, you all might enjoy this. Because the water is fizzy and it's warm and it contains minerals. It is called the Misty Tonic River. Because all the carbonation creates like a mist that's always like effervescing on the top of the river. And because it's water that's filled with minerals, and especially beneficial ones, it's tonic water. And so naturally, the residents who live here call it the Misty Tonic River. And so they were traveling up the river to the headwaters here. And there was a portcullis So there was a portcullis that had a box with an inscription. Inside, in primordial language, was written the following. With the context of whatever the solution is, presumably needs to be put in this box. What can't be burned in fire, nor drowned in water? And I'll type it out. Fluffy wants to pour the water elemental onto the fire elemental. Party says, you just gave me an awesome idea. A dungeon that has a puzzle of perspective involving stretched and compressed space. That would be a good idea, Party Gnome. Make sure you can describe it very well, because not all players have... Like, people have different concepts of perception. So I would just be very careful in how you present that. All right, so Mike offers time. How would you put time in a box? Fluffy Sheep says air. How would you put air in this box? Real Dorgrim says steam. Very interesting ideas. None of the answers would have opened the portcullis. Technotron, while you can produce those underwater and kind of, you know, probably put it in the box that way, with some careful guidance, that would not have opened the portcullis. At this point in time, all of you are taking constant thunder damage as the water, like, reverberates and bubbles around you, compressing you and damaging you. Mike says that sounds like a song, If I Could Put Time in a Box. Fluffy, that still would not open the portcullis. Now, obviously, my PCs were noodling over this as well. And it gets to the point where, you know, I give them each a free clue. And I do it as a skill challenge. So they say, all right, I'm good at this. I want to try and get an answer through Arcana. Or through Survival or something along those lines. And I would give them a thematic hint based on how well they did in that check. But so far, none of you have gotten it. And I will tell you that it got to the point where one of them just turned into an earth elemental and used his magical siege earth elemental damage to break through the tunnel and get around the trap. Party Gnome is correct. That is the correct answer, and that would open the portcullis. But you know what? It came down to it, and admittedly as a DM, I was sitting there and I'm like, come on. This isn't that hard, in my opinion. You know, in looking through it, there was context clues, there were hints available, and it just wasn't something that the party really resonated on wanting to solve. And so the one said, can I just break through the tunnel wall? I said, look, you're a druid, you can turn into an earth element. Well, I mean, it was kind of back and forth. You can turn into an earth elemental, like, I don't know how many hit points a wall has, or whatever. But ultimately, look, I would rather play the game than not. He had a workaround. So, Technotron, this was kind of like you're giving a puzzle hit points. I didn't give my puzzle hit points. I didn't expect it to come down to them just smashing through with that power. But it is something to consider. So, I mean, use my example as a cautionary tale as well. Yep, they tried crystals, gems, coins, all the while they're taking this thunder damage as they were displeasing the magics that be. You think iron works? Iron doesn't get drowned and iron can't burn? Hello, newcomer. Welcome to the conversation. Do you have any roleplay questions or comments that you want to bring to the table? Fluffy Sheep says, I don't know if I'd allow Wild Shape into an elemental in general, but I think what points not to is the players like puzzles. He was the Circle of the Moon druid, so he could turn into an elemental, Fluffy Sheep. And you're true. That is correct. Not all players like puzzles and or riddles. Party Gnome says a Forge Domain Cleric Water Genasi is immune to fire and can't drown. Sure, so if you can just shove your PC into a little box in a portcullis, that might just work. Yeah, Mike says, my answer is Dave the Cleric. You're kind of looking at D&D. You've been watching a lot of D&D content, so you'd figured, yeah. Well, you know what? Welcome. If you have any questions, if you're a newcomer to D&D, have a seat. You're sitting at a table in a game store. You're among friends. You can ask questions. You can look for answers yourself in some way, or however you want to interact with this hobby. You are with friends. Dorgrim says, to me, that is one thing that I take into account for puzzles. If the players aren't having it, that's fine. Not everyone likes them in their RPGs. Mike says, I enjoy a good riddle, but you need to not be too vague on hints, otherwise Dave becomes an answer. Well, that's why context, like, you need context. In this case, it was elemental, like, it was dealing with elements. It was something also that the party was capable of producing themselves. And I also gave very direct hints through the use of a skill check. And you know what? Even with that said, not everyone likes riddles. And, so on me, that's why I said, boy, I kind of wish it didn't come down to pounding down the walls, but there's not really another way without just saying, okay, we're just going to retcon things. Derek is not a riddle person. Party Gnome says, well, if by some chance you have enough people which are able to cast Reduce, you could shrink a person essentially to 1/16 with 4 magic users. That would be a very super specialized. These two elemental like fathers would be very cruel if that's what they expected people to do to come visit them. Instead of just use some nature magic to create ice and and open up the way. All right, I'm going to take another quick break. I'm going to get up and stretch my legs, and I'm getting pretty low on water here. I'll come back, and hey, it's part 3, general conversation and fun. We can talk about logistics of, well, stacking spells like what was brought up here. We can share stories from our own tabletop. If you want to tinker around with any of the characters we've made or talk about the dungeon, we can go from there. So, BRB.